All right. Hello, everyone. We are so excited. This is Ray with Sickle Cell Foundation of Minnesota. You all are joining us this evening because we are doing something very special, something different. We talk about health and we talk about sickle cell disease. We talk about chronic conditions. And one of the things that we don't talk about enough is nutrition and how that impacts our health, and how the SAD diet, the standard American diet, is full of so many inflammatory ingredients that make our health worse. So what better way to talk about living well with sickle cell, living well with chronic conditions, than to talk about cooking in a healthy way, to talk about how do we use non-inflammatory food. Does it have to be boring? Does it have to taste like cardboard? Absolutely not. So I have a couple of incredibly special guests that are here with me today. But before we get going, I want to make sure that I cover a couple of things. First and foremost, what you are seeing here today is part of our new program, SickleSMILE. That is finding the fun and healthy things that make us smile and doing more of it. Cooking is one of those things that makes me smile, and maybe it makes you smile too. I want to be sure that I thank our sponsors and our partners. And so the Sickle Cell Data Collection Program in Minnesota is a partner in that, as well as Beam Therapeutics and Be the Match. So those are our partnering sponsors, and we are so grateful and appreciative for their contributions. Also, let's see. Oh, I said it, didn't I? Special thanks to our partners and sponsors. All right, so before we go any further, I want to introduce you to a couple of incredibly special ladies who's going to be with us in each of our sessions from now until the end of the year. Yes, I said the end of the year because this is going to be a monthly cooking class. So Kate Shafto and Jenny Breen, I'm going to turn it over to you all, and you let me know when you want me to share the screen again. Don't forget you're on mute. Oh, not anymore.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Kate, go ahead.
Sure. Jenny, your audio is kind of a little spotty just now for me. Okay, Ray, sounds like that's happening for her too. So I can go ahead and introduce myself to get started. So yes, my name is Kate Shafto. I'm a physician. I trained in internal medicine and pediatrics, which means I can see people from the day they're born to the very end of their days and everywhere in between. I also trained in integrative medicine, which is a specialty for taking care of people in a holistic way that is more aimed toward healing and not just treating diseases. Also includes prevention and the appreciation that many cultural traditions bring a real wisdom around healing that our modern and Western medical system doesn't always appreciate. I teach at the University of Minnesota's medical school, and I also teach with Jenny at or through the Center for Spirituality and Healing at the University of Minnesota. And together we created a class that has really been the foundation of the work that we do in academic setting and teaching health professionals about cooking and food, as well as community types of events like this. Our class is called Food Matters, and we've put various endings on that. Food Matters for Doctors was the original, but then it's become Food Matters for Health Professionals. And now anymore, it's just Food Matters because food matters for everyone. I'm also a home chef, though not formally trained, and have learned much from working alongside of Jenny for the last 6 years. And I grow a lot of the food that I eat. I'm very grateful to have some farming experience as well as space in my backyard to have a little mini farm in the city where I live. So that's my brief introduction. I forgot to say I work at Hennepin Healthcare as well. I also promoted this to several of my patient lists. So hopefully there's a couple folks from my patient panel who might be here and more in the future. And I will just leave it at that, I guess. So Jenny.
All right. Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Jenny Breen. I am a chef. I have a background as a professional chef. I owned a restaurant and a catering company in Minneapolis, Twin Cities area for about 25 years. And also have studied in education and public health. So I've combined my love of food from the industry side with my passion for health and well-being through a public health degree and an education degree. And the work that I do really lands at the intersection of all of those things. So I am an instructor in addition to the class I co-teach with Dr. Shafto. I teach 2 other courses in what I call culinary nutrition. One is in the Department of Food Science and Nutrition. So I'm teaching future nutrition and dietetics professionals. And then the third is another course through the Center for Spirituality and Healing. But in addition to that work, I do a lot of community-based work. So I work with nonprofit organizations that are doing cooking and farming and training youth or adults or community members about the role of food and food systems in larger issues of environmental health and community health and food justice. And so all of the work that I get to do, I feel very lucky that I have all of these different roles, but they all really live at that intersection of human health, environmental health, and community health. And that's really what the foundation and what informs all of the teaching that I do. And I really believe that at the heart of things, we're more similar than different when it comes to our relationship with food and how it can nourish us and those around us. So I'm really excited. You can find more about me specifically at my website, transformingthetable.com. And we're excited to be here. We're going to go through a few slides. We're just going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we referenced already in human health, environmental health, some basic nutrition concepts and culinary concepts. And then we're gonna cook, although I don't know that either one of us is actually turning our stoves on today. We're gonna cook without heat today. So this is core principles. We just put this here to give you a little bit more insight into where we're coming from philosophically and how we try to approach things, acknowledging that there's always more that we can learn. And, we welcome anybody's input or thoughts on any of these. But we believe, and we believe this is proven, that what is good for humans' health is good for the planet's health and vice versa. So that's really where we start in terms of how we frame anything related to food and nutrition. We base our teaching on traditional wisdom concerning foodways, which is supported by research from modern science and generations of cultural knowledge and practice. And so we honor what humans have known long before there was academia. And we also appreciate that academia is starting to look at these things a little differently and prove what a lot of people have already known. And we believe these principles are common to every culture. And we teach with the acknowledgement of our privilege, and there are many different kinds of privilege that we have, and the humility of many cross-cultural and community-based social and professional experiences. So I think both of us really, again, honor that there's so much knowledge and experience that we don't have that is, critical to the broader understanding of and practice of health for all people. And so we always are trying to absorb and learn as much as we teach. Well, there's 3 pictures here, and I like to have pictures because I think we learn a lot about things like nutrition and health with information and words and data. And sometimes it's really hard to translate that into what does that look like in my refrigerator or on my plate? And so there are basically 3 macronutrients that make up all food. All food is one or a combination of 3 things. And the first of those is carbohydrates. You may have heard that term before. If you grew up when I did, you remember the food pyramid, and it had all the pasta and bread on the bottom, and those were the carbohydrates. I think it was maybe called grains back then. But what's really wonderful is if you look at this picture, everything in this picture is actually a carbohydrate. It might have other things in it too. It might also have protein and or fat, but it's really important to understand that it's not as narrow as bread and pasta. All of these things, vegetables, fruits, legumes, grains, all of them contain carbohydrates. And it's really important to understand that. What's most important is that they are in their natural form. And that's when the carbohydrates are there also in their fully fibrous form. So they have lots of fiber, which is what's really, really, really valuable about carbohydrates. And that's where they're in, that's where you find them, is in these whole versions of all of these wonderful foods. Second is protein. So protein, with that old pyramid, I remember it was a hunk of meat. And that was pretty much what I understood as protein. But again, here's a wonderful representation of all different versions of protein. All of the things that you see in this picture contain protein. Some are more protein rich than others, but all have protein. Things like nuts also have wonderful fats. Again, another important thing in our diet. But what is most important about this picture is just to see the broad variety of proteins and where they're available in food. So you see salmon, and you see some beef or red meat, but you also see cheese and almonds and legumes again, and seeds, and even broccoli. And I don't know if that's basil or spinach, but all of these things have some amount of protein. And instead of us worrying very specifically about that particular macronutrient and how much of it we are getting, we like to talk about just getting a variety of whole foods in their natural form. And that's really what these are. And one more, fats, which happens to be my favorite category, because fats are the thing that give us so much flavor. And they also have this incredibly important function, which is to satisfy us. And when I say fats, I'm talking about the ones you find in nature, all of these things: eggs, olives, fish, avocado, yogurt, nuts and seeds, cheese, even chocolate. Those have really excellent versions of natural fats. And those are the fats that we want to consume, and that they have all kinds of nutritional functions and flavor functions and satisfying functions in our diets. And that's what makes them such a great component for cooking, which is how I like to talk about all of this food. Kate, do you want to talk about?
I will pop in and mention this is something that I share with patients frequently. So if you're one of my patients, you may have seen this. And we love to teach about making salad dressing because it is such a practical and practical, cost saving, and only takes a little bit of time sort of cooking exercise, which has many, many benefits. And one of the benefits is that we can use very ordinary ingredients, and we can make them in the proportion that we like. And we know exactly what is in it when we make a salad dressing on our own. Salad dressings that you buy in the store often have ingredients that aren't helpful, that turn out to be more inflammatory. We'll talk a little bit more as we go along about what makes up inflammatory foods. But the beautiful thing about being able to make your own salad dressing is that you can avoid things that you don't like or that are more inflammatory in the diet. So we have a basic sort of template, and it boils down to oil and acid, which can come in many forms, a little bit of salt, some sweet, and then an emulsifier, which is a fancy word for a substance that keeps oil and water together, that keeps things in solution. And we can use natural emulsifiers, whereas many salad dressings that you find at the store are going to have guar gum or carrageenan or some sort of a food science equivalent of an emulsifier, which it turns out isn't very helpful for our gut and other things in the body. And then you can add other flavors and things to make it according to your tastes and preferences. So we also suggest using an upcycled jar or recycled jar, whatever you want to call it. If you look at my food view, and I don't know if we're on that, if we're able to see food views. Okay. Okay. So I have a food view. Jenny has a food view. And this is just a recycled jar. I got some sunflower seed butter, took the label off, cleaned out the jar, and now I have this great little container that I can put salad dressing in. And you can keep your own homemade salad dressing in the fridge for weeks. It really doesn't go bad. I've even been just adding, I get down to the bottom and then I'm like, oh, I need a little more. So I add some more oil and I add some more vinegar, and I kind of just keep recycling my salad dressing because I've been eating a lot of salad these days, given how hot it is and the availability of some beautiful spring greens, which we'll share with you as well.
Yes. Next slide. Yeah. And this is a little bit of just an overall tip. Again, I mean, we started by talking about this salad dressing. It's the first thing that I ever teach when I teach. And I teach a lot of cooking classes with a lot of different audiences, but salad dressing is this wonderful combination of macronutrients. So you can talk about nutrition, but it's also flavor combinations. And it's also like a really easy way to start thinking about making your own instead of buying something, because it's pretty simple. It can be very basic and you can use whatever you have. And honestly, most of the teaching that I do that's the goal, is to teach people how to use both their intuition and the things that they already sort of know but don't maybe trust, combined with what you have in your house, in your cabinets at any given time. So understanding a little bit more about the function is part of that. And the other part is just building your pantry and all of the things that make it possible to then, prepare a food without necessarily having to spend a lot of time or money. And there are lots of ways to, do that budgeting. One thing is starting with buying bulk and prepping in bulk. So there are various stores, certainly the natural food co-ops, but even some of the bigger stores, the Cubs and other, large grocery stores have a bulk section, and we really encourage you to go and start exploring those. And what's nice about that is you can buy as much or as little of something as you want. So if you're not quite sure, you've never had it, you're not sure you're going to like it, you can buy a little bit. And that goes for grains or beans. It also goes for spices sometimes. So, you can start with those things. And then if you find that you like it, you can buy more. And then like Kate said, she has an upcycled jar. I have whole shelves full of old canning jars or old, salsa jars that I've washed, that I then store my bulk grains and beans in. And what's kind of nice about that, in addition to just not using plastic, is that I can see what I have. And so sometimes if I'm standing there and like, okay, I know I've got these things in the fridge, but oh, well, I've got some red lentils up there, maybe I'll grab those. So there is actually a practical piece to being able to see into containers, which is why, like, if I buy, I don't like to, I'll sometimes save plastic containers if something came in plastic, but if they're not clear, I actually don't put food in them, because I can tell you my family will never look at what's inside and it will sit in the refrigerator. So if you can see it, you're much more likely to actually eat it. And then in the same way, cooking in batches is really, really helpful. So instead of cooking beans every single time I want to make something with beans, I cook a big pot of beans and I'll either put it in smaller containers and put it in my freezer, or I'll think through the week and I'll think, okay, today I wouldn't do this today, but I wouldn't have soup, but let's say it's cold outside. Maybe today I'm making soup, and then I'm going to reserve some of those beans to put into enchiladas tomorrow. And then the next day I'll throw them into, corn salad. And so then I have cooked once, but I'm eating 3 meals from that. Or even just cooking a whole chicken at once. And then you can use it in multiple ways, which I've got a, half-eaten chicken in my refrigerator right now. So I might throw some of that chicken into this salad. So there are lots of ways, and it helps certainly to plan, but sometimes if you have those things and they're already prepared, it will kind of help steer you towards what else you can use. And so I think it works both ways. I think planning is really important, but I think also having that stuff on hand just makes it easier to make that step to preparing food. We definitely recommend buying in season right now. Farmers markets are everywhere in the Twin Cities and even around the state. There's a great resource through the Minnesota Department of Agriculture that has a list of every single farmers market in the entire state. So if you're trying to figure out what's closest, and there's always what's most fresh and seasonal at those markets. And usually they're less expensive because they are fresh and seasonal. And so it's a pretty economical way to go. Also, if you do use SNAP EBT, which formerly known as food stamps, many of the farmers markets, including, I actually manage a farmers market in Minneapolis, including mine, they not only do they accept SNAP EBT, but there's something called Market Bucks. So you can triple your spending just by using your SNAP EBT at a farmer's market. So it's very, very beneficial to consider using farmers markets as a source of your produce right now. The crock pot, it's a time saver. It's inexpensive. You can cook meat and vegetable dishes in them. One thing that I like is if you are cooking meat, you can use less expensive cuts of meat in a crock pot because that's a way to cook those proteins a little more tenderly. Obviously, again, like I said, making soups, and I have multiple soups in my freezer from when it was cold that I will pull out at some point when it's cold again, or at least cool. But again, always thinking about what I have now and what I can put away for later. I don't know, where or how old many of you are, but preserving food and putting food by is certainly a tradition that many folks grew up with and maybe still do. And it's another excellent way so you can still buy what's in season, but sometimes pickle or ferment or freeze some of those foods for later. I know both Kate and I have big gardens. I grow so many greens that I freeze greens, and I'm eating greens from my garden basically until spring when I'm plant again. So lots and lots of ways to set yourself up to spend less money and have more food. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think we can just transition to take the slides away and get on to our cooking. So we invite any of you who would like to cook along. Again, Jenny said no stove required today because it's hot, and it's kind of one of those principles of eating with the seasons. Our body often tells us what is the right thing, not in a right wrong sort of way, but what's the delicious and feeling good sort of thing to eat right now, and it's cold things, right? It's salad greens and things that are refreshing. So we have a couple of greens to introduce you to, and I'll start with the ones that I found in my yard and garden today. So I have some dandelion greens, which, if you know that your yard is free of chemicals and pesticides, they're wonderful. And you can eat them raw or cooked. I just picked a couple, for example. And then I also planted beets earlier in the year, like a month ago, and they've come up in. Yes.
Hey, if you mute your video that shows your face, then we can actually see the greens that you're working with.
So I don't have the audio going on my phone. So should I hold them up?
Spotlight it, right?
Yes.
You know how to
spotlight it. There you go. Yeah, just spotlight my food view. That's perfect.
Well, let's see if that, nope, it still only shows you. So you may need to show it in your face view.
So these are my beet greens. These are my beet greens, and they're like the size of my hand, but they're wonderful. And even if you get beets that are fully grown, like these don't have any of the beet on them, I needed to thin my beets because there were too many, I planted too many seeds too close together. So these are wonderful to eat, even if you get beets with the greens on them and the beet is there as a bulb like you're expecting a beet to be. You can eat the greens and you can eat them raw or cooked.
just like you might use turnip greens or any of those root vegetables. The greens are edible and incredibly nutritious. And what's fun about what the ones that Kate has is they're kind of babies, so they're going to be especially tender. If you, I don't know if folks have noticed, but in grocery stores, you can buy baby kale or baby lettuce, and those are considered sort of delicacies because they're so young and tender. Well, that's just young greens. And so we can, if you grow any food, you can certainly grow those yourself, and even microgreens. So that's just a really fun thing you can also provide for yourself.
Yeah. And I will wrap up by saying I have chives as well. So chives are super easy to grow, and mine come back year after year. I don't have to plant them every year. They are in the onion family. And so they have wonderful benefits of lowering inflammation. They taste delicious like onion and garlic, and they're very versatile. So I actually have chopped up some of these chives and put them in a bag in the freezer so that I can have them later in the year, because I have so many chives. I don't know what to do with them all. And Jenny just reminded me earlier today that the flowers are also edible. So that's lovely and delicious. And
which is true of pretty much anything that flowers is edible, right? So for example, I have some cilantro and dill from my garden, and it's starting to flower. The dill's starting to flower a little bit. So that's going to be a really just another flavor of dill. And that's something that is really fun about herbs, is that you have your leaves, and then you have your stems, and then you have your seeds. And those are all flavors of an herb that taste different. So for example, our cilantro is this leafy herb, but the seed of cilantro we know as coriander. And actually in some places, cilantro is referred to as coriander. But they're the same plant. They're just different parts of the plant or different stages of the plant, and they add different flavors. And so that's a really fun thing about herbs. I've got dill, thyme, and cilantro that I pulled from my garden, as well as some lettuce that is a little wilty because I just picked it this afternoon. I should have picked it this morning. And then I have some really nice, I actually didn't grow this, but it is local. It's called Russian kale. There are many, many varieties of kale, so many, and I enjoy all of them. But it's also kind of fun because they too have their seasons. So the first kales that you're going to see that are local are going to be really tender and soft because they're, early season. And then the kale that probably more people are familiar with, the really curly kale, the stuff that's tough, that comes a little bit later because it's a hardier green. So that's a fun thing too. As Kate was saying, eating with the seasons is about listening to our bodies and also looking at what the earth is offering. Right? So I used to have a catering company. We would make these heirloom tomato salads, but only when heirloom tomatoes were available, which was, early fall, basically. And people would ask for it all the time if they were having a June wedding. And we would say, well, that's not how it works. You don't get to just have them whenever you want them. And that's a really wonderful thing, I think, about eating with the seasons, is really getting that food when it's at its peak, when it's really delicious and fresh, and then not having it for a while. So you really, really appreciate it. And I think like right now, strawberries are, coming in. So it's a really exciting time to eat strawberries. But in December, I don't really want to eat a strawberry because it had to have come from far away. Who knows if it was ripe when it was picked and what was put in it to make it, ripen. So I kind of like that ritual of enjoying food when it's really fresh and then taking a break and moving on to the next fresh thing. So those are my greens. I have some things that are not from my garden. I have some purple cabbage that I just have in my refrigerator. So I pulled that out. I do have, these are actually pickled carrots and radishes. This is a daikon radish and a carrot. I was teaching another class and we did a really quick pickle, and that's another really fun thing you can do just to change things up. All this is salt and vinegar, maybe a little bit of honey if you like them sweet. And that's it. And we just put them in that brine, and they're really pickled now because they've been sitting in my fridge for a few weeks. But I thought that would be a fun addition to a salad. We're adding color, we're adding some crunch and texture. So there's lots, salad, the definition of salad is very broad. So you can basically do whatever. I've also pulled out various proteins. Remember our protein picture. So we do have chickens. So I've got some eggs from our chickens. I pulled out some tuna. I have a can of black beans that's half gone from the fridge. So any of these things would be delicious in a salad, and they would amp up the sort of whole meal that it becomes. So I do this a lot. I literally have a 1 bowl meal with all of the things I need to really have, be satisfied and full, but not, not massive amount. Oh no.
Yes, your food view got distracted.
I know I'm sorry, my back running low. I hope it lasts.
No worries, that's how it goes. Yes, I had to do some adjustments on my phone, so apologies for the hand going over my food view briefly there. I was just going to say we are, as Ray said in the chat, we are definitely wanting to hear from people who are attending these about interests that you have in various topics going forward. And I think pickling might be a fun one to do at some point, maybe next session or later in August when there's lots of things to pickle. So we could do that. And if other people have ideas, please put that either in the survey that Ray invited you to fill out or in the chat so we can keep track of those things.
And I will add, Kate made one reference to the gut, and there's certainly a lot more to talk about in relation to the gut, and it's extremely related to the topic of anti-inflammatory foods, as are all of the things that we talk about, because all of the foods that we are introducing to you are totally related to eating low inflammatory foods, and also just generally eating in a way that is preventative or that is nourishing and supports really good health and can prevent, occasionally reverse chronic disease. And I think what we're going to do, I'll take 1 second to do a very quick knife demonstration, but I think we're both just going to prepare food I have so many different versions of acid and fat. And so I think I can talk about what I'm going to ultimately, I don't even know for sure. We'll see what I end up deciding, but what I'm going to put in my dressing tonight. And I think Kate will be doing that too. And so again, we do have recipes and we always will share those. And we really like to remind people that they're guides, they're frameworks, they're templates, but you're not beholden to the recipe, and you should never let that stop you from making food. So if you find that your recipe calls for, rice vinegar, but you have apple cider vinegar, or you don't have any vinegar, but you have a lemon, that is just fine. That's your acid. And that's kind of the way that we really encourage you to start exploring these different ingredients and flavors and components. And I also just want to say, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll happily let Ray interrupt us at any time with questions. So if there's something you didn't quite understand or you can't quite see, please let us know.
Yes.
Well, I'm good at interrupting. So what I am curious about, like, we're talking about all of these good foods and that they're healthy for you, but thinking about it from a different perspective is, what happens when we're not using these kind of foods?
Yep.
When we're using the either, sometimes those low cost foods is because they can make it so cheap because they're putting all this bad ingredients into it. What does that do to our bodies? And what does it mean to have an inflammatory condition like sickle cell disease or like diabetes or even cancer? Those are all inflammatory conditions.
They are. Happy to talk about that while Jenny's doing her prepping there. And then I see Edwin's comment, learning more about anti-inflammatory foods is going to help you manage joint pain. Absolutely. So I actually work in pain management. I didn't mention that in my introduction, but that's how I know Ray. Ray and I met through a seminar that I gave on how to bring a more holistic approach to pain care in sickle cell disease. And the lovely thing is that the principles of lowering inflammation apply to really any chronic disease, like Ray mentioned, those examples of diabetes, as well as cancer, sickle cell. Sickle cell is unique from the other two in that it has a very strong genetic component. However, the thing that is common to all of those conditions, including heart disease, autoimmune diseases, on and on, is that once that process of inflammation is going, we can use food to really change the trajectory of that inflammation. We may not be able to change the genetics just yet when it comes to sickle cell disease, but we can change how the body responds to various aspects of each of these diseases through the food that we eat. And we eat many times a day, at least a few times a day. And so what we eat and drink, very important to notice what we drink. Those are ways that we can intervene often, sometimes even more often than taking a medication. So the way that
And
that
those-
happens, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and maybe you're about to get to this, Kate,
Yep.
but those foods that you referenced, Ray, are not, so you've heard me say the word whole food and the way that it comes in nature, and that is what our bodies understand and
Right.
know how to process. And when you know, it's not us, but it's the food industry has come to learn that they can use really cheap ingredients, change foods into these very easily bought, easily consumed, easily, digested, although not in the way that they should be, right? They go down quickly. They can use really cheap ingredients, but they're so broken down and transformed into things that our bodies don't recognize and understand. And that is the issue.
Yes. So the preservatives, and Ray just mentioned that preservatives, the abundance of corn and soy in many of the highly processed foods are very inflammatory. And like Jenny said, they're not things that our intestines, our gut, our digestive system really recognizes. And that's where the inflammation begins, is really in the digestive system and affecting the gut microbiome, the microbes, the bacteria and fungi and all kinds of other little critters that are essential to our well-being and are in constant communication with our environment and our immune system. And so when we alter the gut microbiome, when we're feeding it, when we're feeding ourselves foods that are really broken down, like these highly processed ingredients, I like to say, where things have been digested before you eat them in a factory, like those corn products and soy products and sugars have all been broken down and then put back together, kind of pre-digested in a factory before they're put into a food product. When we ingest those, they create changes in the gut microbiome, and those changes affect the level of inflammation and what it communicates to our immune system. So yes, the gut is an entire session. We do a lot on the gut when we teach our classes. So
there are lots and lots of culinary approaches to sort of revitalizing all of these components that may have been, it's not permanent, right? Even though these foods can do damage, we can sort of undo that damage by changing what we put in our bodies. It's really extraordinary how powerful that can be.
And it can happen quickly. So by starting to put some of these types of foods into our bodies, it feeds the healthy bacteria. And that goes a long way to start reversing and changing that source of inflammation. And we fully acknowledge that the cheap foods in our food system are the unhealthy foods, and that's for a reason. There are lots of food policies and food politics that determine that, and it's not just, and it's not fair.
It's not just, and we, a lot of the work certainly that we both do has to do with really changing those systems. And it is a system, and we it isn't one individual or one ingredient or one product. It's a system that has been built up over the last 50 years that has really changed what's available and what's affordable and what's accessible to people. And there's lots and lots of great work in communities all over the Twin Cities and all over the country where people are starting to take that back and say, we're not letting you control what we choose or what we eat or what we grow or what we have. The term food sovereignty is an expression of that. You may have heard that term, you may not, but you can imagine it's basically saying we're no longer going to be subject to the way that you want us to live or that you're forcing us to live. And we're going to make choices and make changes and support the policies and the people and the organizations that help us do that by, teaching us how to grow food and having farmers markets in communities and offering, food support that pays for healthy choices and all of those things, building skills like cooking skills and even shopping, procuring food is a skill, and understanding what's good for you is a skill. Although I think many, many, many people know these things, they've just been so overwhelmed with you walk into a grocery store, it's pretty overwhelming, right? Yeah. And so if you're struggling to, make choices and you maybe have limited resources and you maybe have children who've been exposed to a lot of marketing or, foods that haven't been nourished for them. There's a lot of barriers and a lot of challenges. And so not just one thing. We would never stand here and say, now that you have this information, go do all these things. But understand there are many, many ways to sort of start taking those barriers down and connecting with other people who are trying to do that and, good resources for doing that.
I love that you guys are talking about farmers markets and you're talking about growing food, because one of the reasons that I feel like, that many of us, and I'll use the word us, tend to buy some of the foods that we do is because of affordability. And so even though we know it's not good for us, we're trying to get the most for our money. But what I hear you saying, which is really exciting, is learning how to grow some of these foods that stores are overpricing is really helpful. Learning how to get the most out of your farmer's market is really helpful. And then learning how to can and things so that it can last you, especially in Minnesota. We only have so many months of growing season. Being able to have foods that we can use even in the winter that we salvaged from the summertime. I think that's pretty exciting.
All of those things are absolutely perfectly true, Ray, and you did a really nice job of summarizing that. And then there's one other thing that I would just add to that. And, we are really, really careful and intentional about not saying there's one particular diet that is the best or the, one eating style that everyone should use. Although what I will say is scaling back on the animal products and pushing, adding and increasing the amount of plant foods that you eat, again, is a really anti-inflammatory approach to eating. It's also often a little more affordable, and it's certainly easier to grow your food when you're doing that, right? None of us can, we do have chickens, although we don't eat the chickens, we just eat eggs, but nobody can have a cow in their backyard. And there's a whole issue around how meat is produced in this country too. And so scaling back from those things that can have a lot of issues attached to them and emphasizing and increasing those things that we know are really high quality, really nourishing foods is also another approach. So those two things go hand in hand.
The other thing, go ahead, Jenny.
I'm going to just do a really quick knife demonstration because I want to make sure and get that in, because that's I think a really important thing that sometimes can feel like a barrier or just a deterrent, is people feel like I don't really even know how to use a knife right. So I like to tell people that investing in one good knife is really worth it. You don't need a fancy set of knives, but having a good chef's knife or chef style knife. I'm going to show you a few different ones. I've got a few. So this is sort of a classic version, and this is more of the what they call an Asian style. Is really worth it, and you can find decent knives at IKEA or at target even, the thing that's really important is just keeping those maintained by honing them and getting them sharpened when they start to get dull, because that's what makes a good knife a dangerous knife. But once you have a good knife, just using it, practicing holding it where kind of, if you can see where the handle meets the blade, right here in the middle is where I really want to be holding it firmly. One finger and thumb on either side. I'm really choking up. I don't want to hold it back here. And I also don't want my finger to be out like this, because that's actually dangerous. So just holding it like that and putting the tip of my knife on my cutting board, just like it's attached to the cutting board, and just gently rocking back and forth with my elbow and my shoulder. And that's the rhythm that I want. It's very quiet. It's very still. I'm not moving very far around. And then if I'm cutting something, I'm going to take my fingers and protect them. And I'm just going to gently rock, right? So depending, I want to know, of course, what I'm making so I can figure out what shape I'm cutting before I start cutting. But once I do that, I'm just going to gently rock back and forth. And you can hear how quiet it is. It hardly makes any noise. But also you can see I don't even move that much, because I'm really just getting into this rhythm and going back and forth. And that is really important, because it makes the preparation process a lot less frustrating, a lot easier if you have a good knife and you're using good technique. Herbs, I want to mince them pretty small. And the thyme, I'm actually going to pull my thyme off the stems, because they're what we call hardy herbs, and those stems are pretty tough. But with the cilantro and dill, I can leave the stems because they're very soft. And then I'm going to use my fingers as a bridge in this case, or put them on top of the knife like this. And then I'm just going to chop. So I'm really hardly touching the herbs at all, but I'm keeping my knife really stable so I can get these very small, but you can still barely hear it. It's not a noisy, choppy sound. It's just a really gentle sound. And that's all really. If you just work on holding it firmly in a good spot and gently rocking, don't try and go fast. Just try and be efficient and use good technique, and the speed will come over time. And that will make all your chopping a lot less frustrating. I'm going to throw those right in my salad.
So what did you end up putting in your salad dressing, Jenny?
Well, I'm still in process. So I have, so far, I just have olive oil, mustard, and apple cider vinegar. Mm-hmm. I think I might squeeze some lemon in there too. And then for me, because that sounds pretty sour, I'm going to balance it probably with some maple syrup. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I have, which is just, I've been really into this lately, I have something called tahini. Oh, yeah. And tahini is like peanut butter, only it's made from sesame seeds. So we had my daughter's graduation party last week, and we had Asian food. And so we have a lot of Asian flavors. So I've just been adding tahini to everything. So what's really fun about something like tahini or peanut butter or almond butter, which are all, nut or seed butters, is that they're this great combination of fat and protein. Mm-hmm. And so you get, which is just such an excellent way to get your fat and your protein, because you get a combination. They're usually delicious, right? Oh, like I love nuts and seeds, but they also have iron and magnesium and calcium. So they're just power packed with nutrients and flavor. So it's like you get all of that in one thing. And this is a pretty thin, like you can see it's coming right out. So it's a texture that works really, really well in salad dressing, because it won't get too thick, but it'll make it creamy. Yes. That's what I got in there so far. How about you? What do you put in yours?
So I have olive oil, and then I have this white wine vinegar I've had for a very long time. So it's probably even more aged than it started out as. And some mustard, and then a little maple syrup and a pinch of salt. So we'll see how that goes. I was thinking of putting some cilantro in it too. I was able to get some cilantro from my garden. And note about the cilantro, my cilantro plants from last year went to seed. The seeds fell in the ground, and this year more cilantro came up right where the seeds had fallen. So that doesn't always happen, but I was really excited that it did this year and I didn't have to plant cilantro on its own. It did that for me.
Well, herbs they can be perennials without even, without you intending that, because
Yeah,
they drop their seeds.
right.
So I have another question. So
Sure.
you all are making dressing, which I think is so cool because all the different flavors you can make. So I actually have two questions here.
Yeah.
The first one is, what is one of the worst oils that you can use? Because there's lots of oils out there and they all claim that
Great
they're the
question.
best. So let's talk about that. Whether you're cooking with it, it with heat, or whether you are making a dressing. Let's talk.
That is an excellent question, and one of the most common questions that people ask, because fat and oil is so confusing and the marketing is really, really misleading. So there is one way, there are two ways really to get oil out of a food. There's one natural way and there's one unnatural way. So the natural way would be to take something like almonds or coconut or avocado or olives that is naturally full of fat and to squeeze it out, right? To press it or spin it so that oil comes out. So all that is you just took that oil out of something that it existed in, right? The other way to get fat out of something is to use chemicals or heat, both of which basically change the toxicity of whatever that ingredient is. And it's usually because that ingredient doesn't have a lot of its own natural fats. And so you really have to extract it. And that would be something like corn or soybean, all right, where you are really having to change the chemistry of that ingredient to get that oil out. And that makes it toxic for us to consume. So when we always kind of joke, what is vegetable oil? What vegetables have oil in them? Can anyone think of any? There really aren't any. And so if you look at the ingredients of your vegetable oil, it's most likely corn or soy, which means undoubtedly it's been processed in one of those ways with chemicals or with heats or maybe both. And so it's really something you don't want to consume. Sadly, I think that is one of the places where cost is really significant, right? Olive oil, avocado oil, the oils that we know are quality oils also are much more expensive than the oils that we know are not good for us. And if there is one area where I would say it's worth it to try and invest a little more, I would say that those oils are a really important place. And I would also say, look for things on sale. A cheap olive oil is still going to be better than any kind of corn or soy oil. So, look for something where you know that there's fat in that food naturally, right? So coconut oil, there's a lot of controversy about coconut oil because it's a saturated fat, but it's naturally saturated. That fat comes from that food. It exists that way in nature. That's really different than margarine that is, saturated by chemistry. All right. So it's a little bit of information and knowledge, and it's a little bit of, my intuition just this doesn't make sense to me, right? Like, what is vegetable oil? I know what an avocado is. I know what an olive is. I know, what a sesame seed is. Maybe I haven't cooked with it, but I know what it is. So that's how I would answer that. And it's a really, really confusing because you will see all kinds of health claims on oil bottles.
Exactly. I think they like to keep us confused.
Yes.
That's part of the marketing.
Yep. I put a couple of comments in the chat just to for people who are visual and who might need just a reminder that quality oils are the ones Jenny listed, olive oil, and really the common denominator is cold pressed is the common denominator. But also
another word you might see is expeller pressed.
Yeah,
and that's just the process of expelling it.
Yep.
So those are good things. Cold pressed and expeller
Yes.
pressed are good things.
Yep. That means
Yes.
heat has not been used, and that means that hexane, which is a chemical that's very toxic, is one of the ways that oil is extracted from corn and soy and made into vegetable oil.
Say that again and then type it in the chat. What kind of
I
oil
did,
is
yeah. It's called hexane, Hexane. And Jenny, sorry, your food view went away completely, so we can't hear your audio. I typed it in the chat that corn and soy oils are also extracted with a chemical called hexane, Hexane, and that's what comprises vegetable oil.
So I lost my my food view, but I'm still here. I promise.
Okay, thanks. Yes, and so
we
cold
have a
pressed
great-
is the denominator.
We have a really good question in the Q&A, and I'm going to read it out loud, and then I'm going to let either of you answer. What
Yes.
is a quick and easy meal to prepare for a picky tween that is healthy? I would like an idea that doesn't have to be prepared with a stove. Also, I am intimidated when it comes to preparing a meal without a meat for my family. I hear you loud and clear. So any ideas are welcome. What a great question, right?
Really good question.
You said it in the beginning. Once you've been exposed to all of these other food options, it's you normalize that, and the body starts expecting that type of food and your taste buds. And so I think that's a great question. What do you have to say?
I would start, first of all, I would say you don't have to do everything at once, okay? Especially with a tween, right? So let's not overwhelm someone by making 7 changes in the first meal. So, don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. It's really, it's a gradual thing. We start with things, so maybe they like Chipotle, right? So Chipotle has, my kids love Chipotle, so you can build your own bowl. So bowls are really trendy and popular right now. So I will often, with my family, I'll make a pot of rice and a pot of beans and cut up different vegetables and, saute some and leave some raw and put it out on the table, and people can add what they want. Now, you might want to say you got to add something green or something like that. You have to try one new thing in your bowl tonight. But that's a really fun way. And you can put chicken out there, or you can put beef out there. I always say when it comes to meat, I really, again, encourage people to know what that animal is eating, because that's going to inform what you're eating and the quality of that meat. We talked a little bit about our food system and animal production, and there's unfortunately a lot of really terrible production processes when it comes to animal foods. But regardless of that, that's one really fun thing. Make a fun sauce, make a dressing, get your kid involved in preparing that food. I work with a lot of youth programs and a lot of families, and kids actually really like to prepare food, and it empowers them and it makes them very, very interested in what they have prepared. So maybe they get the job of making the sauce, or maybe they get the job of cutting up the greens, or maybe they get the job of picking an ingredient that they haven't tried before, but that maybe they'd be willing to try. So there's all kinds of ways to make it about what we get to do instead of what we have to do, or what we get to have instead of what we don't get to have. So definitely frame it around the positive. There's no reason that it can't be something that is appealing to them and something that maybe they've had, but you're doing it with maybe more whole ingredients. So instead of white rice, they're having brown rice or quinoa, or instead of, instead of white bread, they're having some kind of a roasted root vegetable. So we haven't even gotten into the conversation about roasting vegetables, because
It's amazing.
It's hot. But when it's cool, you can roast a whole bunch of vegetables and then have them in your fridge for when it's hot and throw those into your bowl or your salad. So again, it's not that different than the recipe template that we showed you. You think about You want some kind of a grain or, starch. I usually like to think of a whole grain. You want lots and lots of vegetables, and then you want some kind of a protein, and your fat, your dressing, your sauce is what ties it all together. So we've got the dressing because we just taught you how to do that. And then just play with what you like and maybe just try one new thing at a time. And engaging your kids, that's a huge thing. And I promise you, kids, first of all, they have taste buds, they have palates. We don't have to dumb food down to them. That's a marketing ploy.
Right.
And we can let them explore too. So definitely bring them into the conversation and into the choices, and, make it more about this is what we're doing and learning together.
Well, I love that. And you said it, you don't have to change everything at once. And that's kind of when we freak out, like, what about what I really, so I totally agree with that. Doing the little things starting out, especially when you have a family, everyone has a little bit of a different palate or might have different preferences. So I think that's really good. We are wrapping up, so I want to make sure that we wrap up with, let's summarize the salads that you all made. And then also, I want you all to know that if you're looking for the recipes, we will make those available. What I'm going to do is to create like a Google Drive where you all can download it. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the survey in just a moment. But first, I'm going to let you all summarize your salads that you made.
Well, I will start. I found some carrots in my refrigerator, which are actually, I think, from last season. And they came in a CSA that I got for our family. So I chopped up some carrots. I also have some hazelnuts. Those are local nuts. And I chopped those up. And then my salad dressing. I also put my chives and beet greens and dandelion greens in there, all mixed up. And then I made my salad dressing with white wine vinegar, mustard, some maple syrup, olive oil, a little salt, and cilantro. And I just need to shake it up, and then I can pour it on. And we in my family, we eat fish and chicken and other meats, and so we have a tiny little piece of salmon which we plan to cook and add to the salad for a little more protein in addition to the vegetables and the nuts.
Wow, that's awesome. And the color is beautiful, by the way.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I love the colors.
And that's another thing actually I wanted to mention is play with color, because that is information, right? Yes. The more colors you have, the more nutrients you have too. And it's really easy to just associate one with the other. It's a very straightforward thing.
And so it's beautiful to the eyes too. It's not just great nutrition, it's beautiful to the eyes, and that's important for digestion.
Cool.
Sorry, my phone died, but I have my greens, I have purple cabbage, I have the carrots and radishes. I actually have these toasted sesame seeds. So since I'm putting tahini, the sesame paste, in my dressing, I thought it would be fun to have the sesame in two forms. Mm-hmm. So I get a little bit of crunch and protein and all that nutrition from those. And then I have my dressing with my tahini and mustard, maple syrup, cider vinegar, and olive oil. And I actually have eggs. We have a lot of eggs because we get like 3 or 4 a day. So we are like constantly trying to ways to use them.
I love eggs. I'll be getting some of those.
All right, then you will. I'd be happy to send some your way. So I'll probably either soft boil or, do these over easy, and then we'll just have them with the salad. So that's, again, a little bit of additional protein, not too much hot cooking, and using what we have.
Very cool. Very cool. I am so excited about this series that we're doing. I want to make sure that I thank you all. I'm going to share my screen real quick just to run through a couple of slides. Again, thank you to Dr. Shafto. Thank you, Jenny Broccoli Breen. We are grateful for these lessons. We are going to be holding these every month. What did we say, on the 4th? The fourth Tuesday of every month at 5:30 Central Standard Time. So You will see in the next day or two the rest of the sessions for the next couple of months that will open up, and you all can register for those in advance. And then also the survey. So we have the survey. This survey is so important. Number one, we want to identify what are the barriers that people experience that can impact your healthy eating or not healthy eating, inflammatory foods versus non-inflammatory. We talked about several of them, and that's cost, financial, but is it access? Is it not knowing how to find a farmer's market? Is it just being intimidated and not knowing how to put it all together to make a yummy meal? But it's also finding out what would you like these recipes to be? Many of you are from diverse backgrounds. I want to know, let me tell you something. Not only was I raised in Minnesota, but I have not been exposed to all of the amazing vegetables and different culinary styles that are out there from diverse ethnic backgrounds. We want to incorporate that into this show. We've got 6 shows that we still have left to do. That means we have a lot of room to do things. We want to talk about growing your own food while the sun is still up, and we can still plant a few things indoor and outdoor. How do we do that? We talked about pickling. We talked about having something to understand the gut and bacteria in the gut and balancing that and how that impacts our health. Roasted veggies. We had all of these different ideas that came forward. So in the survey you can find, I used our bit.ly address. So it's cooking healthy -feedback form. You can see it right there. I'll also put it in the chat with no problem. And then based on, now, when you do your survey, you will be entered into the drawing for 2 $25 Amazon gift cards. But to make sure that link doesn't get leaked out to people who didn't attend, you'll have to use the same name and email address. Okay, so that we know that you were in attendance. All right. And we're asking that you complete it by Friday. Part of that is because the longer we give you to do it, the more you're going to forget to do it. So if you do it here in the next couple of days, then you get it done and over with. All right. Let's see. Also, I just want to highlight the session that we did last February with Dr. Shafto, where she did an entire SickleSMART episode on nutritious eating and the things that you may not have known about eating healthy and the importance of using non-inflammatory foods for chronic conditions that cause inflammation. So you can find that on our YouTube channel is the best place. You can go to our webpage and go through our SickleSMART, but it's a lot easier to just sign up and be subscribed to our YouTube channel. Okay, let's see. And sign up for, I didn't mean to have that transition in there, but you can again sign up for those future monthly virtual classes at our bit.ly SickleCellMN -cooking healthy. All right, and that's where you will see all of them appear in the next couple of days. And our next SickleSMART session is actually this Thursday. And I'm really excited about that. That is with Dr. Charles Jonasant. We're going to talk about managing stress to minimize pain. And so we are so excited. I have known Dr. Jonasant for several years now, and the work that he's doing at the University of Pittsburgh around pain and sickle cell disease and pain management, just across the board for all people who have chronic pain, is amazing. So tune in, and you can sign up at our bit.ly SickleCellMN -SickleSMART. All right. So we hope to see you there. And then we have a couple more sessions that are coming up after that. We're going to talk about the correct use of IV fluids in a sickle cell crisis, as well as how a good pharmacist can save your life. We never think about that. We never talk about that. Why is it important to have a pharmacist on your medical team? And how can they contribute to making sure that you're not interacting medications that could be harmful to you? All of that. So we've got some good things coming up. And then future events, what I suggest is that you just subscribe to our Eventbrite channel, and that way you'll get a notification every time we have a new activity or event, because you don't want to miss them. We like to have fun around here. That's why we have the SickleSMILE program. I'm not going to show this video, even though what it's about is donating blood. There is a massive shortage in the community, and some, not all, but a great deal of that is based on the fact that we need diverse blood donors. The best matches come from diverse blood donors so that we can make the best match and get the best results. But people with sickle cell disease and other conditions who need transfusions need us to donate. And yes, if you have sickle cell trait, you can donate. All right. Last but not least, I know Ray has a lot of announcements. Again, the same thing with donating blood is the Be the Match registry. There is a curative therapy that's out there, which is bone marrow transplant or stem cell transplant. The biggest problem is that there are not enough matches to make that successful and less risky for the patient. So we need you to join the registry, and if you're called upon to donate bone marrow, to do that. Not just join it, but know that if you get called upon, we want you to show up. And then last but not least, if you are, I shouldn't say last but not least, it might not be, but if you are a sickle cell warrior, someone who's living with sickle cell disease, or if you are a provider, Be the Match does have a new site where you can get resources, and they'll send you a resource package full of lots of fun information, as well as connect you to someone who can kind of walk you through what that means. So SickleCellConnect.com. Order one for yourself, your loved one, or you can share that resource with your patients. And then our voices matter. We do have a feedback loop in it. This is separate from the feedback for the show. That tell us about your medical experiences. When we have a seat at the table, we want to talk to them about your lived experience. So we can use those clear examples. We don't use your name or any of your private information, so don't worry, but we do need to hear about your experiences, both good and bad. All right. And that's it. We are so grateful that you joined us for today's SickleSMILE episode. This is actually our first SickleSMILE virtual episode. And so we are so grateful that you were here, and we will see you next month for our Cooking for Your Health, and we'll see you later this week for our Sickle Smart. All right, everybody. Again, I will put that link in the chat so that you all have it. And we would love for you to be sure to fill out your form. There you go. You can click on it and it should take you directly there. Any last words, Jenny or Kate? But we thank you so much. And we'll see you next month, everyone. Be sure to share your ideas, because we want to make this one of the best virtual cooking shows. Those cooking channels won't have nothing on us, right? So we'll see you next month. Take care, everybody.
Everyone.
Jenny and
Take
Kate, can
care.
you stay on for just a moment?
Sure.